recording. Hello. Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Nu-Trix, the synth guy, and today I'm going to be Nu-Trix, the console, the mixer guy. Now, I am on a quest to find the best iOS compatible mixer. And when I say compatible is that I want to have the option of hooking my iPad or my iPhone to a mixer that has at least 12 inputs, and that when I patch my computer, when I patch my iPad or iPhone to that mixer using USB, my iPhone or iPad should see at least 12 input. So I should be able to record my stuff, my hardware, in my iOS devices. That's where I want to go. I want to combine the hardware and the iPad because I find it easy and quick to work. This is it. Today is my quest for the best iOS mixer with multi-track USB audio. And it's for bridging the gap between my hybrid hardware studio and my iOS production workflow. And I think that's where I get stuck, because I can do a lot with the iPad, I can do a lot with the hardware, but then I need to record into the computer and then export to the iPad, and it's kind of, okay. Can I just have like one thing that just right away I go record and it's in my iPad, or it's on a standalone device and I have that mix ready to play with? I have the MX1 from Roland, and I have also an Allen & Heath mixer, a Z10 effects. Both of them, they're really good. They work well. This one has up to 18 inputs into the computer, so it's a very powerful one, but it has no driver for the iOS. If I add driver for the iOS, I'd be super happy. But Roland doesn't do it. They didn't do it, and I'm not expecting for them to do it, because for the age of the mixer, it should have been already done. They're not going to do it. They're probably, if they do it one day, it's going to be with another console. So I'm looking to get rid of that one, find another console that has, of course, if it works with the iPad, it will work with the Mac, so it's not going to be a problem. But that's where I want to go. So I started to look, and it's kind of hard to find that online, the information, because most of them, they say, oh, iOS compatible. When you start looking into the specs, you find that most of them, they have like 2 ins, 2 outs, or 4 ins, 4 outs, or 6 ins, 6 outs. And, you know, they're really limited in that case. And most of them are stereo or 4 in, 4 out. And that's it. Even if they've got 20 inputs, they sum it up into sending the stereo mix to your iPad, which is not bad, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for multi-track recording straight into my iPad. And I don't want to buy another interface, because technically the mixer should be able to do it. That's how I see it, and it exists. So I want this to be for my hybrid studio. I want this to be at least 12 inputs. But if I add stuff that I have here, knowing that I bring stuff all the time that people send to me, and I test it out and do video about it, and I also have pedals and effects I want to put in. So there's a question of 12 would be kind of the minimum, but I would have to patch and repatch. And 24 would probably going to be, you know, I have extra space for guest equipment to patch in, and anywhere in between. And I don't know if, you know, do I want it analog style? Of course I want it analog style, meaning I want to have, you know, at least knobs per tracks and mute and solo and faders. You know, I want tactile into an interface. You know, I want to be able to play with that. If possible, as much as possible, one knob, one job, you know. And I want it to be US compliance. That's something we just talked about. I want it to work on the iOS without any driver. Of course, if there's a software that opens up the features, I'll be happy. But I want it to work without any driver, knowing that if in 5 years they don't support it anymore, it works without driver. It's native. It's compliant. It doesn't need any driver. So that's where I want to be, because I want it to be, in the long run, something I can use as long as I can. So that's where I start. Then the question is, multi-track audio, really important for me. Of course, that's what I just talked about. I want to be able to have, it doesn't mean all the inputs, but at least 12, 16 inputs sent to my iPad so I can actually use it and record like it's a multi-track system. And the big question would be, is it digital or analog? I don't really care. You know, I'm not fixed on that. I'm not sure if it should be one or the other. There's plus and minuses for each of them. You know, a lot of people say analog is warm. Yeah, but these consoles are not like the high-end $500,000 mixer. They're like a $1,000, you know. So they're still going to be affordable. So of course they're going to give you color, and they're not bad. I don't know. Yeah, if you like it, I'm not against it. Digital, the plus of the digital is that it's flexible. You know, you can save stuff. You can save scenes. You can automate parts. You probably have more stuff because it's digital. You have more compressor, more EQ. Because it's digital, you've got more of that. So, you know, which one do you want? I listed only these because these are part of the models I'm interested in, and that I trust the company, and that their price range is within what I want to pay. So it's between $600 US to $1,100 US. If you look at the Mackie Onyx series, or the Tascam model series, or the Presonus Studiolive, the AR12 or 16 series, they're all analog consoles with the interface on that. So you've got these. These are the three brands I will look for the analog possibility. And for digital mixers, I looked into the Zoom, the LiveTrack L12 and L20, and the Presonus Studiolive 1402 USB. This is discontinued actually today, but you're going to find it still in store, and you can also find it used market. So it might be an option you want to look into, because it could be exactly what you're looking for. But so we're going from $600 to $1,100, which is almost twice the price, but you don't get the same thing. Of course, if you look at the $600, if you look at that section here, you see that the Onyx, the Tascam Model 12, and the Presonus, they're same price, and they all have 12 inputs. And when we're going to look at them, they look like they have the same features, mostly. If you look for 12 ins, that's where you're going to be. The LiveTracks from Zoom cost a little bit more, $50 more, but then it's digital, and you have some stuff that you don't have in the other one. So we'll look at that also. Then a little bit more money, and another $50, you get to $700. Then you get the Onyx 16 and the Studiolive AR12c. A good jump, another $100, you get to the Model 16 from Tascam. And I'll explain why this one costs more. When you look at the Tascam models, they're not made the same way, and they have a different philosophy behind them, or vision, and it makes them really stand out in a way. So it might be exactly what you're looking for, or it might be like, no, this is not what I want. So we'll look at that. And when you start at 24 inputs, then you're at Onyx, $24,900, the Model 24 from Tascam, and the LiveTrack, which is at 20 inputs, and you've got the Studiolive 16 inputs, but because it's all digital, and I would say that the Presonus, the 1602 USB, it's the one with, you know, motorized faders. So for 16 inputs, it's going to cost you more, but you're going to have what the, you know, digital stuff you'll find, and more EQ, more compressors, more of everything in it, but 16 inputs, you know. So it's a question of where you want to go, and it's also multi-track into your iPad. So all of them will send more than 12, because the minimum they have here is 12, at least 12 inputs straight to the iPad to be able to record into your DAW, and all of them, they work without any drivers. You can add drivers or add software to have some feature or some control over it, but all of them, they work without any driver, which is the good thing. Which all of that I know, I gathered was using the manuals and the online information and people doing reviews on them. So let's look at what's common between them. If we look at the analog mixers, what's common between the Mackie, the Tascam, and the Presonus, all of them, they have 3-band EQs. You know, they look really analog-ish. They are analog. And all of them, you've got a low cut. You know, either you have a low cut, something like this here at 100 hertz, something like this, 100 hertz, or a low cut here. So, I mean, it's basically the same logic. All of them, they're brand who have been building consoles for a lot of years. Tascam, they go way back. Mackie also, but Tascam, they were the one who created the Porta Studio in the 80s, even maybe before that. So all of them, they create good quality and good musical EQ you can use. And so if I listen to all the reviews I looked and I hear online, I'm guessing it's going to be what we expect from all of them. You know, a sound that is good and analog. You have stereo line inputs. What's interesting is that for all of them, you have an amount of inputs are as, you know, the mono input. They can be a line in or a microphone. Some of them, they've got combo inputs. So the same plug can be a line or a microphone. And some of them, they have 2 different inputs. But then when you go into the stereo tracks, let's say the 1112, for example, you have a choice of having a stereo 2 cable for the lines or a stereo input, or patching one microphone, and that same track becomes either mono mic or stereo line. So it's a way to have one fader per microphone, or if you don't use a microphone, it becomes one fader for a stereo input. So a 12 input with 4 of them or 6 of them being stereo becomes an 8 microphone input or a 10. So depending on how they made it. So that concept, all of them, they're using it, you know? And all of the 3 brand offer built-in digital effects. And they're not, I'm guessing they're not bad. And for what people talk about, they're, I would say, average, you know, standard. I have effects in my Allen & Heath Z10 effect, and they're good when I listen to them, but I never use them. Just because I've got a compressor here and I've got plugins in my software, so I don't use them that often. So they're there to use. I'm guessing more for live use than maybe studio use. Again, it depends on if you like them, use them, but I'm not going to put my choice of my mixer / interface over the fact that there's reverb and delay in them, because that's not where it's going to break the deal for me. It's more about the other features. Instrument inputs. They all have switches to turn the 1 and 2 into instrument input. Outside of the Model 12, Model 12 from Tascam, that's where it's bizarre, because if you look at Presonus, Mackie, and Model 16 and 24 from Tascam, all of them, they work the same way. Input 1 and 2 can be switched into instruments, so guitar input. But the Model 12, all of the inputs can become switched to instrument. So you could plug directly 8 guitars. Interesting, surprising, but even right away it tells you that Tascam, for the models, the 3 models they have, they don't have the same vision over the 3 of them. So that Model 12 is kind of alone in this. So if it's important for you, right away, your choice has been made for you. It's just like, this is the option. All of them, they have Bluetooth feature. Might be useful, let's say, on the live show. You want to play music before the show, between 2 shows, whatever it is. You hook up your telephone, send it to the input. It's kind of, it replaced one of the stereo input into a Bluetooth input. You just, you know, pair them together, and that's it. It works. All of them have it. At least the analog mixer. The digital one don't have it. So the meters, they're fairly simple. You know, 12 segment LED, and that's it. Just showing you that there's volume and it's too loud or not enough. At the back of them, of course, they look similar. I mean, you've got inputs. If you look at the same type of mixer, you've got the same amount of inputs. You have different options in the output, though. But the one thing that is obvious when you look at all of them, they don't have any return. They have aux out or sends or sub or sub mix out. They have no return. So if you're sending anything to an effects like a stereo delay or a pedal and you want it back, well, you need to think about how many inputs you need, because you might say I need 12 in for my instrument. Well, you might need another 4 in just for your returns, because they're going to be using normal inputs. So think about that. And also look at the inserts. Not all of the input have inserts. In the case of the Tascam, the 1 and 2 have inserts. That's it. If you look at the Mackie, inserts are on 5, 6, 7, 8, 4 of them. And if you look at the Studiolive AR16, input 1 and 2. So if using inserts is important for you, right away there's another way to decide right here. When you look at the differences, there's a question of how many sends do you need? Do you need to send a lot of monitor send? Let's say you use this to do live shows with your band and there's a lot of musician playing. You want to use at least one headphone mix, at least a mono one to each of them. In this case here, most of these, they have a very limited amount. I mean, you have maybe 2, 3, 2 sub here, a stereo sub, 2 monitor. It means that you get 3 instruments. The other one is just 2 aux out mono. The other one is 2 aux. So it's made for a little studio at home and a couple of headphone mix, and that's it. It works well, but that's how you should look at it. How it looks from the front. When you compare the Ar12c to the Ar16c, it's mostly the same console. The only difference is you have more of these mono inputs. Between 4 and 8, these are new mono inputs on the 16. The rest of it, it's exactly the same. Same amount of effects, same amount of, you've got 1 effects, 2 aux, 1 monitor out for the main out. That's it. It's all the same. If you look at the Mackies, they're basically all the same. It's the same console 3 times. The only difference is you have more inputs, but same layout, same options. If you look at the amount of effects and monitor out, exactly the same. So it's not because it's bigger that you have more monitor outs or more effects. No, it's the same box over and over with just more inputs. Done deal. The Tascam is different. The 12, the 16, and the 24, they're physically different. If you look, these are the size of the real boxes. If you look at the differences, it becomes bigger and bigger as you change. The fader length on the 24 is a lot longer, so it's really for mixing. If you want a bigger faders, that's where you have it. If you also look at the options for the outputs, you have more options as you go up the numbers. If you look at the 16, you've got 1 effects out, a sub, and a main. And if you look at the 16, you have an effect, a control room, a sub, and a main. Whereas in the 24, you've got a sub, a monitor 1, monitor 2, and a main out. So you have more and more and more. Also, there's a difference in the effects. The Model 12 and the 16, they have effects for the outputs, but you have more control on the 16 than on the 12. And then when you go to the Model 24, you've got a parametric EQ for your room EQ. That is a fixed one. So stuff goes up and changes as you go up. Also, you should note that the Model 12, at the back, it's combo input, whereas you don't have any combo input on the others. But also, the Model 12 is the only one that when you connect the USB to your iPad or your Mac or your PC, it can become a DAW controller. So all of the faders can send MIDI input and MIDI control to control your favorite DAW. So you can use it as a surface control, whereas the 16 and 24 does not offer that. So it's really different models for different targets. The 12 is for the one person in the studio. The 24 is for somebody who wants to use it as a mixer for live or even to mix straight on it. It's really interesting, really interesting. Now, if we compare the numbers, the Mackies, they go 24-bit, 44 and 48 and 96. The Tascam they go 16 or 24, and they're at 44 or 48. They don't go up to 96. So is it a problem? Not sure. I don't see it as a problem. Some people would say it's a problem. I don't see it. And the Presonus are 24 bits, 44, 48, 88, and 96. So they have the whole thing. Now, to record on SD cards, that's interesting because if you don't want to set up anything, if you just want to say, I'm going to record what I'm doing right away, either you're live or you're even in your studio and you don't want to have to hook up a computer, you don't want to play with that, you just want to record what you're doing, press record, the Mackie and the Presonus, they will record stereo. Stereo 2496 instead of, in the case of Mackie, the Presonus is going to be 24, 44.1. So it's going to be fixed. So there's these limits, and it's going to be stereo. It's going to be the mix that you have, and that's it. Whereas if you record on the Tascam, it's going to record all the inputs, which is, the 12 doesn't have 12 inputs. That's bizarre. The Tascam's interesting and different because when they say 12, they're not actually running at 12 inputs. The 12 has 10 inputs. The 16 has 14 inputs, and the 24 has, 22 inputs. The logic is that it's going to record 12 into your computer or 12 straight into the box, into the SD card, because it's going to record all the tracks plus the stereo mix. That's where the 12 comes in. So if you want to do really multi-track recording just as a dawless system, the only real options here to have the whole thing is the Tascam, because you're going to be able to record all your separate tracks plus the stereo mix in real time into your SD card. Then if you want to work it somewhere else, take the SD card, you go computer or iPad, and then you put it there and you can just copy the files and continue working. Or you can actually use the Tascam Porta Studio brain that is in it to just use it as a studio by itself and mix it. So it's more complex, more complete. And because Tascam has been doing Porta Studio for so many years, they're a step ahead from the others in that area. And I think it's important for them because none of the others are offering multi-track recording straight to the SD card. So a studio in a box and that's it. They're the only one. The audio multi-track in and out. So how many tracks do you send in and out? For the Mackie, you have 14 or 18. So if you're in the 12 input, you're going to have 14. So it's always the 12 plus a stereo track. So it's going to be 14 inputs. So inputs into your iPad, but you can only send 4 outputs. So you can send basically a stereo mix and a, sub or monitor mix if you want. Same thing for the 16. You're going to have 18 inputs and 4 outputs. And they're going to be 24-bit 96 kilohertz. So you can go full maximum quality on this one. The Tascam, the 12 will give you 12 in, 10 out. The 16 is going to give you 16 in, 14 out. Keep in mind that, like I said earlier, it's going to be 14 inputs, actually. The 16 is for the stereo main out. And the 24 was going to be 24 input and 22 output. It's going to be a 16 at 24 bits, and it's going to be 44.1 or 48 kilohertz. It's top. That's the maximum. What's interesting is that it's the only one, again, that gives you as the same amount of output to go back into the tracks as the console can have. So you can actually take a full mix you have in your iPad running on the software you prefer using the internal effects of Cubasis or ZenBeats or Aria Pro or Beatmaker, whatever it is. If it supports multi-outputs, then you're able to say 1 to 16, and you can have all of these sound coming back, and you can mix on your mixer and add stuff you want if you want, on hardware stuff you want, or combine again, because each track you can switch between input, instrument, or the USB in. So you can really mix in real time between hardware that you're playing and some software coming in. It's just, for me, you can hear by the way I talk about it that this is really interesting because my goal to have this hybrid studio running stuff from my iPad and from my hardware, and it seems to be like one big studio working together. That's probably the one that is the most aim into that direction for me. The Presonus only have 2 outs, so it's the same thing. It's 12 in, 2 outs, 16 ins, 2 outs, and they return into the input 15, the last two, 15, 16, or 11, 12, depending on how many tracks you have. That's basically for the analog mixer. Now, if you look at the digital mixer, you've got 2 we're going to talk about. The 2 of them, they basically have the same logic. You have what they called, a fat channel or channel strip, if you want. You don't have that space on the mixer for each track to have this. You have a channel strip. So each track, you click on the track, and then that section becomes active for that track. So you only see it once on the board, but it's available as you select and you go around. So you have the channel strip. You've got 2 sends for the effects. So that's for the 24, because the 12 only has 1 effects. You have the high, the low, and these are fixed, and a mid that is sweepable with a choice of a frequency. You've got a low cut, you've got a phase you can inverse, and again, that's for the 20 input. The 12 not sure has a change here. And you have a compressor for each of the track, which is interesting. Gain, of course, and a pad if your signal's too loud. And the Presonus, now you're looking at something that is more like a live console or a very, a more professional console. That is the panel on the board that is active. When you switch inputs, the whole thing becomes available for that input. So you've got the channel, in this case, channel 1. You have the frequency for the high-pass filter, the gate threshold if you turn it on, the digital out, so it can actually just be routed to another output to be post-treated. You have a compressor on, the threshold, ratio, response, the gain, or you can put it in auto mode. You got a limiter, and that's for every input. So that's really powerful. And you have an EQ with 3 band with a control of the frequency, the gain, and the shape. It can be shelving, or I think it's just bell, a bell or high Q bell, and a shell or a bell for the high. So, and for each of them, you also have the pan, a phase inverter, and a 48 volt. Now, this is something interesting. Most of the other device, either you turn the phantom power for all of the input at once, or for a bunch of like 4 inputs, 4 inputs, and 4 inputs. And this one, you can actually turn it on for each input separately. If you look at the inputs themselves, the one at the top, this one, again, there's no return, same logic. If you want to use external effects and send it back in, there's no return. So you're going to use input. So this one has 16, the other one has 20. Actually, 16 microphone plus 4 or 2 stereo in. The big plus of the Zoom 20, L20, is that you have 6 different monitor outs. If I'm not mistaken, 3 of them are stereo and 3 of them are mono. So it's really interesting if you want to record a lot of people playing, you want to send different headphone mix. This one is really made for that. Whereas the other one has 4 mono output, again, workable. And you've got MIDI in and out. It's the only one that has MIDI in and out. So if this is something important for you, go ahead. You have monitor output, main output separate. So you've got separate control between the control room and the main output. So the options here are okay. And I mean, all of them are interesting. It's really a question of how it works for you and what do you want to do. If you look at the overall look, well, faders are more interesting on, of course, the Presonus, and they're bigger, longer, and they're motorized. So that could be interesting if that's what you want. Whereas the other one is not motorized. But a very cool feature of the L20 is that every track has its own LED, its own meter. So right away, you've got a visual, response on the mixer, all of these input going in. So it looks more like what we used to see in a DAW, where you have the information for each track. So this is really interesting to have this. I mean, and I don't understand why not more people have something like this. Just, besides the fader, right away you know how much volume you have for each track. So it's really visual. I like that. And I mean, all of it's very laid down, it's very clean, and they're not too big, you know. If you look at the zoom, there's a big difference between the 12 and the 20. You know, the amount of input, the size of it is really different. So if you're on the move, the 12 is going to be useful. It's smaller, but you have wind effect less, and you have less input, of course. The zoom is a 16-bit, 24-bit, 41, 48, and 96. That's internal. Whereas the Presonus has 32-bit floating point inside it. So it's really high-end for the quality of the mix, but it runs at 44 and 48. Now, keep in mind, this one is discontinued, but honestly, it's still a good pretender in this world of digital consoles. Record to SD card. Actually, the Zoom can record 16 or 24 track, actually 26 track, straight into, not 24. It can record 16, it's an error, 16 or 24? It's an L20. Why would you have 20? Oh, I think it records the 20 plus the monitor outs, if I'm not mistaken. But it's not an L24, it's an L20 at the top. And the Presonus has no internal recording, but you can send all of it through USB to the next device, and your computer or your iPad are going to record it. Do I need SD recording? Yes. Do you want multi-track SD recording? Then the Tascam or the Zoom are the two you should look at. Do you really need the 96 kilohertz? If that's the case, the Tascam will not do the job. The Live 1602 will not do the job. You want motorized faders? Then the Live 1602 will do the job. You want MIDI? Only the Presonus 1602. You want scene recall? Oh, then it's going to be Tascam. It's going to be the Zoom Presonus 1602. You want compression on each track? Well, the Tascam has it. Yeah, for an analog console, they have an analog compression on each track. That's interesting. The Zoom L and the Presonus, they also have compression. If you want a DAW control, well, it's going to be the Tascam Model 12. Just the 12, which is kind of weird. But then that's it. So there's a lot of question. I personally, you probably guessed it from my interest when I talked about it, but I personally really dig the option of the 24. My next step would be to actually put my hand on one of these and test it out, see if it actually answers what I want to do. But I just like that board. It looks nice. You see the compression. You want a live input. You want a PC or USB input. You want a... I did that over like a week of searching, and this is something I would do when I buy new stuff, even if it's used stuff, because I want to know which one would be the best, because you often don't have the choice of really using them until you're actually buying them, and then after a couple of weeks, you say, well, it's not what I wanted, because I hoped it would do this, or I guessed it would do that, and I was wrong, you know. So reading the manual, hearing people review, that's how I got this to this list. That's it, guys. I hope this is useful. And again, if you have any question, put them below. Stay safe. See you soon. Have fun. Make music. Cheers.